Sa iba pang balita, Senador Joel Villanueva pinadidismiss sa serbisyo ng Ombudsman dahil sa maanumalyang paggamit nito ng kanyang Priority Development Assistance Fund o Pdaf noong taong 2008. Ang detalye niyan alamin natin mula kay Jervis Manahan via phone tag.
I-dismiss namin Ombudsman Conchita Carpio-Morales si Senator Joel Villanueva mula sa kanyang serbisyo. Ito'y matapos mapag-alaman ng Ombudsman na guilty ang Senador at dating SIPAC representative sa grave misconduct, serious dishonesty at conduct prejudicial to the interest of service. Inaprubahan daw ng Ombudsman ang dismissal order ni Senator Villanueva at siyam na iba pa dahil sa misuse o maling paggamit ng Pdaf ni Villanueva noong taong 2008. Bukod yan, haharapin din daw ni Villanueva sa Sandigan Bayan ng 2 counts ng graft, 1 count ng malversation of public funds, at 1 count ng malversation through falsification of public documents. Kasama sa mga pinidismiss sina dating Department of Agriculture Secretary Arthur Yap, ang staff ni Villanueva na si Ronald Chamonte, ang empleyado ng DA na si Delia Ladera, mga NABCO representatives na si Alan Havellana, Romulo Relevo at Julie Villaralvo Johnson, pati na si Rodora Mendoza at Maria Guanizo. Kasama rin sa charge sheet si Aaron Foundation Philippines President Alfredo Ronquillo. Nakapag-alaman daw ng Ombudsman na noong 2008 ay naglabas ang Department of Budget and Management ng 10 milyong pisong Pdaf ni Villanueva para sa ilang agri-based project sa Region 11. Matapos ang 2 araw, inirequest ni Villanueva na i-release ito sa NABCOR bilang implementing agency. Ginamit daw ito ng mga respondents para bumili ng mga seedlings ng iba't ibang gulay gaya ng pechay, labanos, sitaw at yellow corn. Pero base sa investigasyon, hindi naman daw suitable ang lupain na Region 11 para sa mga nasabing gulay. Wala rin daw ang mga pangalan ng mga benepisyaryo ay hindi mga rehistradong botante o residente at wala naman daw na ipatupad na agri-based livelihood on. Bukod dito ay nagsumite raw ang respondents sa mga peking dokumento para sa ghost project na ito. Sinabihan na raw ng Ombudsman si Senate President Coco Pimentel na ipatupad ang dismissal order laban kay Villanueva. Samantala, ayon naman sa pahayag ni Senator Joel Villanueva ay lumang kaso na ito at isinapapa noong siya ay congressman. Wala raw siyang natanggap na ganyang laking halaga at napag-alaman na rin daw dati ng NBI na pineke ang ilan sa kanya mga pirma sa ilang dokumento. Nag-file na raw si Villanueva ng motion for reconsideration at hahayaan na raw niya si Senate President Coco Pimentel na magdesisyon kaugnay nito. Naniniwala raw siya na makakamit niya ang hustisya. Isa si Senator Joel Villanueva sa mga nanguna sa race sa pagka-senador nitong nagdaang 2016 elections. Yun muna ang latest. Balik muna sa inyo, Audrey.
Maraming salamat, Jervis Manahan.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Yes, Mr. Secretary, please go ahead with the reference of business.
Bills on first reading, 1, 2, 3, 4, an act for the stewardship and conservation of built cultural heritage and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Paulo Benigno Aquino IV.
Referred to the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Local Government, and Ways and Means.
1, 2, 3, 5, an act prohibiting a no permit, no exam policy on any such policy that prevents students of any educational institution from taking their examinations due to unpaid tuition and other school fees. Senator Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
Resolutions. 230, directing the Senate Committees on Environment and Natural Resources, on Agriculture and Food, on Health and Demography, and on Trade and Commerce to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the failure of the Bureau of Customs to dispose of the almost 4 million kilos of frozen meat that threatens the food safety and security, health and sanitation of the general public, and strengthening the conservation and protection of the environment with the end in view of proposing appropriate remedial interventions and legislation. Introduced by Senator Cynthia Villar.
To the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
231, directing the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Food to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the failure of the Bureau of Customs to come up with the implementing rules and regulations of Republic Act number 10845 or the Act declaring large-scale agricultural smuggling as economic sabotage that threatens the viability of the local farmers, particularly rice and sugar producers, and diminishes government revenue collection efforts. Senator Cynthia Villar.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
232, directing the appropriate Senate committee to review the implementation of Republic Act 10817 or the Philippine Halal Export Development and Promotion Act of 2016 with an end in view of ensuring that the religious significance of halal is not disregarded in making halal exports more competitive. Senator Sani Angara.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food and Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship.
233, directing the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Food to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the reported improper utilization of Coco Libby funds. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
Committee report. Committee report number 9 submitted by the Committee on Finance on House Bill number 3408, introduced by Representative Nograles et al., entitled An Act Appropriating Funds for the Operation of the Government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2017, and for other purposes, recommending its approval with amendments. Sponsors, Senators Ligarda, Angara, Aquino IV, Lacson, and Villar.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Communication, letter of Assistant Ombudsman Jennifer Hardin Manalili, addressed to the Senate President Aquilino Coco Pimentel III, which pertains to the Office of the Ombudsman decision in OMBCA 150298, case entitled Field Investigation Office versus Emmanuel Joel J. Villanueva et al., which was approved on October 11, 2016.
Mr. President,
Referred to the Committee on
Mr.
Rules.
President.
Majority Leader?
before that action
Okay.
of referring it to the Committee on Rules, may I be allowed a parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
You see, Mr. President, when this issue was called to my attention yesterday, as a matter of fact, I understand that my office was, they sent a copy to my office. And I was reminded by the poem of a prominent Protestant pastor. I'm sure you're very well aware of this. Let me just repeat it for the record. From Martin Niemöller. He said, first they came for the socialists. I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I'm reminded, Mr. President, because I saw that in the journal, we have a letter from the Ombudsman dismissing Senator Joel Villanueva from being a senator. If that's how I read the letter. Now, my attention was called by Section 21 of the Republic Act 6770, which is the act that created, created the Office of the Ombudsman. So this is where their power comes from. So my question, my parliamentary inquiry is, how do we interpret Section 21 of the law that the Congress passed, which created the Ombudsman? Section 21 reads, officials subject to disciplinary authority, exceptions. The Office of the Ombudsman shall have disciplinary authority over all elective and appointed officials of the government and its subdivisions, instrumentalities, and agencies, including members of the cabinet, local government, government-owned or controlled corporations, and their subsidiaries, except over officials who may be removed only by impeachment or over members of Congress and the judiciary. Paano ito, Mr. President? That is my parliamentary inquiry. How do I interpret it now? Section 21 and the communication that you're about to refer to my committee. That is my problem, Mr. President. May I be favored with an
Senator
answer?
Drilon wants to be recognized, and he is recognized.
Mr. President, with the permission of the Majority Leader, I agree with the Majority Leader, Mr. President, that indeed under Section 21 of the Ombudsman's Act, the under Section 21 of the Ombudsman's Act, the Office of the Ombudsman has disciplinary authority over all elective and appointed public officials, except over officials whom may be removed only by impeachment or over members of Congress. This is consistent with Article 6, Section 16, Paragraph 3 of the Constitution, which empowers the respective chambers to discipline its members and the power to expel a member. Apparently, what happened, Mr. President, is that the case against our colleague, Senator Villanueva, was investigated, and the Field Investigation Office filed a case against Senator Joel Villanueva, while our colleague was a Director General of TESDA. And therefore, the Ombudsman took jurisdiction over the person of Senator Villanueva while he was an appointed official of TESDA, over an act which was allegedly committed while he was a member of Congress. That is the situation. Now, so that when the Ombudsman rendered a decision, the administrative decision, finding Senator Villanueva to have committed allegedly these acts complained of in an administrative case, and therefore issued an order of dismissal. But the problem is the Ombudsman included the accessory penalty of perpetual disqualification from holding public office. And that is now the basis, according to the Ombudsman, of the order which the Majority Leader received, asking the Senate President to dismiss Senator Villanueva on the ground that he is now disqualified from holding the position of the senator. We believe, Mr. President, that this is a case of first impression. We have gone over quickly the established jurisprudence. We could not find a case which squarely would touch on the same on this issue. The authority of the Ombudsman, the lack of authority of the Ombudsman over members of Congress is recognized by jurisprudence, including the case of Office of the Ombudsman versus Rodriguez, decided in 2010. But in this particular case, the case was decided while the Senator Villanueva was, or the case was filed while Senator Villanueva was the Director General of TESDA. So I would strongly suggest that the matter be brought to the courts immediately, because this is a matter which would have to be decided by the courts. There is, in my mind, a very strong argument on the point of this House having authority to discipline its members. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, we might as well place on record also, or highlight the fact that the supposed action of Senator Villanueva was done when he was congressman. All right. Now, anyway, I think that will be a very good test for the courts to decide on. Now, with that, my next question then is, what do we do before your, that's why I stood up before you referred it to my committee, Mr. President. Because what do we do with resolution number 82 of the Philippine Senate? Resolution number 82 of the Philippine Senate, signed by President of the Senate, then Ernesto Maceda. Title, Resolution expressing the sentiment of the Senate that when any judicial order of preventive suspension is served upon the Senate President, such order shall be sent to the archives to be retrieved upon such time as may be determined appropriate by the Senate. The resolution is self-explanatory, but more or less that is the gist. Well, anyway, I leave it to the Senate President to decide.
The chair would refrain from answering the parliamentary inquiry and just ask the body if there is any objection to the referral of the letter, of the said letter, to the Committee on Rules. Because if there is no objection, then that should stand. Is there any objection? No, there being none, so let the letter be referred to the Committee on Rules. And all of this discussion will be brought out in the Committee on Rules. But I have studied the case, and I will give advice to Senator Villanueva in private.
And I will make sure that I will invite you in the hearing of the Committee on Rules to tackle this issue, Mr. President. I will immediately call a meeting of the Committee on Rules, and I will make sure that the legal secretariat of the Senate are all present, or members are all present.
A Majority Leader, Senator Subiri, wants to be recognized. So, Senator Subiri, you're
Yes,
recognized.
with permission of the Majority Floor Leader. I just was wondering why they took full cognizance of, or the Ombudsman put all the focus on our colleague, Senator Joel Villanueva, when there are several pending cases. This is the first case that she actually dismissed his position and considered him removed from office. What about the others pending in the House of Representatives? Even in this August chamber. So, kawawa naman, no? Naawa na ako sa aking kaibigan na all the focus is pinned on him when this is basically preliminary investigation. I don't even think that there was still a filing with the Sandigan Bayan, as far as I know, Mr. President. I'm just putting that on record, Mr. President. I think it's unfair to our colleagues.
This is an administrative case, actually, not a criminal case.
With that, Mr.
Majority
President,
Leader.
and the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. House Bill 3408 under Committee Report Number 9.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, House Bill number 3408 under Committee Report number 9 is transferred to the calendar for ordinary business.
With the permission of the Chamber, I move to consider House Bill 3408 under Committee Report 9.
Any objection? Hearing none, House Bill number 3408 under Committee Report number 9 is under consideration.
May we ask Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary, please do so.
An act appropriating funds for the operation of the government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2017, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Chairman of the Committee on Finance, Senator Loren Legarda, be recognized, after which Senator Cynthia Villar, Senator Sani Angara, Senator Bam Aquino, and Senator Ping Lacson, the Finance Subcommittee chairs, will deliver their co-sponsorship speeches. Senator Loren Legarda, Mr. President.
The Chairman of Committee on Finance is hereby recognized, Senator Loren Legarda.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, We live in extraordinary times, and we are going through an extraordinary time of change. It is therefore my honor to present to you our proposed 2017 budget that sets bold plans to meet not just today's needs, but one that looks beyond 2017, one that contributes to delivering long-term solutions to the country's long-term problems. The 3.350 trillion proposed national budget for 2017 is the biggest annual budget ever assembled, a budget that will help deliver the change that our people want and need. The budget before you is not a mere compilation of cold and impersonal words and numbers. It is the lifeblood of our nation, crafted to fuel hope and inspire our people to believe in our collective future again. One has to read between the lines of these hefty books, for behind the hard numbers lie stories of real people whose pleas were met with either apathy, neglect, or by the arrogance of power. Tucked within the thick pages of this book is the memory of young Cristel Tejada 3 years ago, who killed herself unable to raise the 10,000 pesos tuition fee she needed to continue her college education. Our countrymen still affected by the wrath of Typhoon Yolanda 3 years ago and in dire need of assistance until now. Or the farmer mercilessly shot to death because he was asking to be given rice at a protest rally in the drought-stricken, unirrigated farms of Kidapawan, North Cotabato. They are the faces of the more than 22 million Filipinos who are poor, half of them living in extreme poverty and lacking the means to feed themselves. Mr. President, it can no longer be budget as usual. We need to have a budget that works, one that places money where they will make a real difference in improving the lives of our people. We need to have an inclusive budget, one that will consider the needs of every Filipino without prejudice to age, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity, ethnicity, faith, and religion, and physical limitations. We need to be ambitious for our people. But how can we put life into this ambition if the resources to deliver programs are not spent? I am outraged by the fact that while our people are pleading for as little as a few hundreds of pesos to buy food, or a few thousands to continue education, billions of funds intended for programs have remained untouched. As of June 30, 2016, our government is saddled with total unobligated allotments amounting to 156.98 billion pesos. Agencies simply were not able to spend these funds released in 2015. The logic escapes me. While agencies by law have only until December of this year to spend these funds, it is unwise to indulge in wasteful year-end spending, because this can only result to sacrifices in spending quality. Mr. President, our budget is our investment for the future. It is supposed to construct new mass transport systems, new airports, road systems, and schools. They are supposed to fund services for the sick and the poor and the vulnerable, provide electricity to our people, build irrigation for our farmers. The unspent amount could have built 678,662 decent homes for the poor, 29,276 kilometers of farm-to-market roads, 215,000 classrooms with toilet and furniture, or it could have put more than 3 million Cristels through university. Underspending simply means missed opportunities. It means denying our people the services they deserve. We would not want to engage ourselves, however, in a blame game here. What we wish to encourage is that we all work together and provide the people what is due them. We are therefore proposing a budget that provides a disincentive to hoard funds by limiting executive discretion to impound funds, in accord with the decision of the Supreme Court. This budget will also clearly define the conditions under which savings may be declared compliant with the decision of the Supreme Court. Starting next year, savings can only be declared under the following conditions. First, final discontinuance or abandonment of an ongoing program, activity, or project by the head of agency concerned due to causes not attributable to the fault or negligence of the said agency, which would not render it possible for the agency to implement said PAP during the validity of appropriations. Second, non-commencement of the PAP for which the appropriations is released. Non-commencement shall mean the inability of the agency or its duly authorized procurement agent to obligate the released allotment and to implement the PAP due to natural or man-made calamities or other causes not attributable to the fault or negligence of the agency. Third, decreased cost resulting from improved efficiency during the implementation or until the completion of the PAPs. Fourth, the difference between the approved budget for the contract and the contract price, including any variation required for its project. Programmed appropriations which have not been released or allotments not yet obligated shall not be considered savings. Mr. President, the national budget is anchored on a sound reading of the domestic and international economic outlook. We are forecasting real gross domestic product, or GDP, to grow at 6.5 to 7.5% over the coming year, with inflation rate settling at the level of 2 to 4%. The 364-day Treasury bill rate is projected to hover between 2.5 to 4%, while the peso-dollar exchange rate is seen to eventually settle to between 45 to 48 pesos to the dollar. Our gross international reserves are projected at $86.3 billion US dollars, equivalent to 8.9 months of our country's imports of goods, services, and income. These assumptions are based on government's forecast of strong domestic demand and investment, which will continue to boost our economic growth. Some uninitiated fear that the exchange rate assumption may no longer be relevant since the peso-dollar rate is now approaching 49 to the dollar. Such fear is unfounded. On the contrary, a peso depreciation favors the government's fiscal position. Specifically, for every peso depreciation, expected revenues increase by 9.2 billion due to imports and custom duties. While this will also translate to an increase in government's disbursements by 2 billion to pay for foreign-denominated debts, the net effect then is still a positive 7.2 billion pesos. Mr. President, our budget seeks to deliver results. This will require an expanded spending program in 2017 that will result in a slight increase in our deficit from 2.7% of GDP this year to 3% in 2017. This, according to our budget experts, is still manageable and necessary to sustain the country's growth momentum. By the end of the year, the government's debt is expected to decline to 42.7% of GDP from 44.7% in 2015 and 52.4% in 2010. Our economic projections suggest that this trajectory will continue to contract to 35% in 2022. A proactive debt management will be exercised to strike a balance between easing the debt burden on expenditures and a more strategic borrowing, guided by the objective of improving and expanding the delivery of services and benefits that will be felt by all Filipinos. Mr. President, the highest poverty incidence in the country is in Mindanao, and this budget takes the conscious effort to address that. Mindanao has the highest budget growth among the island groupings, with its per capita allocation for 2017 outpacing that of Luzon and the Visayas. As a people's budget for real change, 1.345 trillion, or 40% of the entire budget, is being proposed to deliver social services that will address the most basic needs of our people. 151.5 billion pesos is being proposed to fund health services, including the hiring of doctors, midwives, nurses, to service the needs of our poorest communities in the country, to build more hospitals, to procure medicines. Rehabilitation centers for drug dependents will be built as part of the government efforts to find a lasting solution to our war on illegal drugs. This government is delivering initiatives to improve education. Funding is set at the level of 699.95 billion pesos to finance the construction of classrooms, hire teachers, and procure instructional materials. 78.7 billion pesos is set to support a comprehensive social investment package in the form of the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, targeting 4.4 million eligible beneficiaries by next year. Inclusive growth means sharing growth with everyone. Thus, the 2017 budget provides social pension to all indigent senior citizens aged 60 and above. Mr. President, we have a proud history of hardworking people. We should make it easier for them to contribute to our nation's growth story. As such, a leap in infrastructure spending is one of the priorities of the 2017 budget, given its indispensable role in poverty reduction, in raising productivity, in spreading the benefits of economic growth. By providing 860.7 billion pesos for infrastructure development, equivalent to 5.4% of GDP, we are taking a huge step towards ending our people's daily commute of 3 to 5 hours to and from their places of work and schools. We are hopefully strengthening the foundations of education and health, facilitating commerce, promoting mobility, revitalizing industries, strengthening services. The government is committed to delivering better economic services. Thus, 27.6% of the budget, or 924 billion pesos, is allocated for this purpose. Our farmers and our fisher folks, many of whom rely on subsistence agriculture, will be better served through credit support and insurance, financial and technological resources, irrigation, and infrastructure support. This budget will endeavor to provide food for our producers in the rural areas, a sector most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Energy poverty will be addressed. For this, 1.82 billion will be allotted for the Sitio Electrification Program of the National Electrification Administration, or NEA, covering 2,410 sitios in remote areas. 820 million pesos will be allotted to the Department of Energy for the nationwide intensification of household electrification, and 190 million pesos for the household electrification program in off-grid areas. Regional economic development will be supported through initiatives that will unlock the potential of our MSMEs, boost agriculture, strengthen our competitiveness, promote tourism, as well as to build resilience in our communities. A fundamental responsibility of government is to protect its people, to enable our government to succeed in its war on drugs and criminality. we need to provide it with the wherewithal to bring this campaign to its rightful conclusion. As such, we are proposing 206.6 billion budget for public order and safety, up 19% from 173.2 billion this year. This includes the 500 million pesos for the DILG's Masa Masid, or Mamamayang Ayaw sa Anomalya, Mamamayang Ayaw sa Illegal na Droga, a community-based program to engage volunteers in the fight against criminality, corruption, and illegal drugs. As part of our campaign to build a minimum credible defense capability, 147.8 billion pesos will be allocated for this purpose, increasing the allocation by 13% from the 2016 budget. Mr. President, after 2 months of marathon hearings and technical working groups, your Committee on Finance hereby puts forward a proposed budget of 2,497,086,952,000 pesos, broken down as follows, with program appropriations of 2,431,986,952,000 pesos and unprogrammed appropriations of 65,100 million. This budget seeks to provide more to those in greater need. Towards this end, we submit the following amendments. First, this budget will make it possible for the invisible, informal sector to now have access to the government's universal health care program. According to the Department of Health, some 8% of Filipinos are still not covered by PhilHealth. Hence, we have provided a 3 billion peso increase in the PhilHealth budget so that all Filipinos will now be covered by the program, while indigent patients will not have to pay for anything in state-owned hospitals under the no balance billing policy. Your committee, Mr. President, tried to go even one step further by also providing preventive health care services for all government employees in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Unfortunately, PhilHealth is not ready at this time to take on this task. We will persist in this proposal for inclusion in the 2018 National Expenditure Program. Second, we have included a 2 billion peso irrigation fee subsidy in the budget of the National Irrigation Administration so that irrigation service fees will no longer be collected by NIA from farmers' associations. Our farmers who feed the nation are among the poorest of the poor, who urgently need government support and intervention. An accompanying special provision for this purpose specifies that this 2 billion peso allocation shall be used to cover the operating requirements of NIA and the maintenance of existing irrigation facilities which were previously funded out of the collections from the irrigation service fees. Third, all progressive nations have put science, technology, innovation as a centerpiece of their development policy. In our case, around 41% were enrolled in science, technology, education, agri-fisheries, and mathematics, or STEAM, in school year 2014 to 2015. To further encourage enrollment in STEAM programs, we are supporting the grant of scholarships to students enrolled in priority courses in all state universities and colleges. CHED's special provision, prioritizing the provision of state funds to scholars taking up STEAM courses in other key growth areas such as electronics, business process outsourcing, tourism, general infrastructure, and other priority manufacturing industries, will be vital in our effort to build a knowledge-based and innovation economy. Fourth, the justice sector is faced with an ever-increasing prison population. And with this reality comes the continued deterioration of conditions in our prisons, including the inability to provide decent meals to our prisoners. We need to support a humane correctional system that will promote the reformation of offenders. As such, we have provided $388 million for the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, $163 million for the Bureau of Corrections to increase our prisoners' daily subsistence allowance. Fifth, in honor of our centenarians, we have allocated 100 million pesos for their one-time cash grant. Our budget adheres to the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, of ending poverty and hunger, improving health and education, making cities more sustainable, combating the adverse effects of climate change, promoting peace and justice for all, protecting the environment and biodiversity. We are on track to meeting the first of the 7 global targets of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is to reduce disaster mortality. This budget will make sure we remain on course. And because culture is a story as a nation, we shall endeavor to provide the funds needed for the integration and mainstreaming of arts and culture in the country's educational system, as well as support the National Commission on Culture and Arts. I further submit, Mr. President, the following special and general provisions for the 2017 budget. First, in building resilience in agricultural communities, the Department of Agriculture will undertake disaster-resilient agricultural infrastructure projects and practices. The Department of Agrarian Reform will promote the adoption of sustainable farming approaches. Second, we have introduced special provisions that require the integration of educational modules on indigenous knowledge, heritage, biodiversity, environmental protection, disaster risk reduction, and climate change in the K-12 curriculum, as well as in the curriculum of state universities and colleges. Third, a special provision under DNR identifies critical watershed areas, other protected areas, and communities ravaged by extreme weather events as areas to be prioritized as planting sites under the National Greening Program. It in fact even prescribes the inclusion of bamboo, coconut palm, and other indigenous species as planting materials for the program. Fourth, special provision task the DILG to ensure that evacuation centers are able to withstand 300 kilometers per hour winds and 8 magnitude earthquake with natural ventilation and rainwater catchment facilities, as well as special facilities for the elderly, persons with disabilities, women, and children. To ensure rice subsidies in the form of cash allowance equivalent to 20 kilos of rice to be given to firefighters, jail guards, and police. Other personnel to be given rice subsidies are the military and uniformed personnel of the Philippine Army, Philippine Air Force, Philippine Navy. Finally, the DSWD special provision on the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program specifies that the beneficiary shall be entitled to a rice allowance in the form of cash grants amounting to a total of 23.4 billion pesos. In addition, several general provisions are also proposed, requiring infrastructure projects to conform to resilience standards to withstand natural hazards, assigning priority to government structures located in areas highly vulnerable to seismic activity for repair and retrofitting, protecting built heritage, cultural properties, and cultural landscapes from alteration, renovation, or demolition by requiring prior approval by government cultural agencies, requiring the inclusion of the protection of biodiversity in the development programs and the projects of agencies, offices, and local governments, setting a one-year availability timeframe of appropriations under 2017 GAA to instill a sense of urgency among government agencies in utilizing their budget to the last peso. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, once more, we are faced with the task of establishing our funding priorities on behalf of our people. I need not underscore the fact that Congress holds the power of the purse. It is an empty power, however, if the purse strings are drawn tight by the government's failure to spend all of its funds judiciously. The budget bill puts our people at the front and center of our agenda. It aims not just to create growth, but ensures that everyone benefits from the growth that we will all create together. I urge you, Mr. President, all our colleagues, to support this measure. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Senator Angara has will just submit a co-sponsorship speech. Likewise, Senator Mamakino will no longer come up with a co-sponsorship speech, as much as the chairman has already covered most of what is going to be taken up.
The manifestation is noted.
Same with Senator Lacson, Mr. President. In that case, Mr. President,
How about Senator Villar?
Senator Villar will just submit for the record
Also.
her co-sponsorship speech. We will give the members of the Senate copies of the co-sponsorship speeches, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, considering that the period of interpellations on the general principles and budget proposals of the various departments and agencies of the government are scheduled to start tomorrow morning, November 15, 2016, at 9 a.m., to continue until the afternoon of November 18, 2016. We'd just like to place that on record so that the senators would make sure that the schedules are available. In the meantime, I move to suspend consideration of House Bill 3408 under Committee Report Number 9.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Thank you. Mr. President, may we have a 1-minute suspension?
Session is suspended.